Welcome to a football show special Wednesday NFL draft edition. The Titans had a press conference on Tuesday. We're going to talk about what we learned, what we think, and final predictions for the NFL draft coming up on Thursday evening. That is Nick Suss. I am Braden Gall. Thank you for joining us here on this very random Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. Brought to you by Sinkers Beverages, of course, and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Tickets for the Thursday night first round watch party. We've got like 2 or 3 left. So we're almost sold out. You've sold this out each of the last 2 seasons. All the money goes to benefit the Our Kids Foundation. We got all you can eat Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. I saw the menu yesterday, Nick. It is fantastic and very real. It's going to be awesome. All you can drink, of course, from Sinkers Beverages at the Track 1 building in Wedgwood, Houston, right there off 4th Avenue. Very accessible, just south of downtown. Really, really great. So let's get into it quickly here. Go to the Tennessee and pay for good journalism. I'm sure you're going to have great coverage all week long. Nick.
I hope so, and I anticipate it. Yes,
that's the plan.
Yeah, that's the goal.
You first, quick programming note. You and I will be back on Friday morning around 9 a.m. as well to sort of recap what we saw in the first round, look ahead to the weekend, and then of course you and Kaharski and the rest of the 440 squad are going to be available on Saturday night's Sinkers Beverages Shotgun Willie's Draft Party. Saturday night private Q&A off the record. Plenty of tickets left for that event as well. We've got a bigger room for that, so buy some tickets. Come on and hang out for a good cause and have a good time on Saturday night. We, of course, will also be live the second the Titans go on the clock on Thursday evening, myself and Stoney Keeley and JT from the Hot Read. So we're going to be live at Sinkers with all of y'all in the background hanging out like we have been the last 2 years. So we'll go live when the Titans go on the clock. We'll be there for the pick, get some live reaction, give you some analysis, and then Nick and I are back Friday morning. So there you go. That's what's coming up this week. Do appreciate all of that and appreciate all your support. Thumbs up, notifications turned on, ratings, reviews, podcast app, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, number one lesson from the press conference. Chad Brinker, Mike Borgonzi, Brian Callahan on the dais. Spent about 40 minutes answering questions on Tuesday afternoon, a couple of days in advance of the draft. Before, during, and after, Nick, my feeling from chatting with the guys is that everyone, media, organization, is ready for something to happen.
Yeah.
Are you ready for something to happen?
I am so ready for something to happen, and I think we all know what that thing that's going to happen is.
Okay, so that's where we're going to start. I can't remember. I've not covered a lot of teams with the first overall pick, so I have to admit that on the front end here. I can't remember. It just feels like a very odd press conference. Not odd in a bad way, but just interesting that the entire room is like alluding to, we have to like all clear our throats in questions about Cam Ward's. Like, if you do take a quarterback, is this why? Like, it's just, they said, and I was a little surprised Borgonzi said this, but I guess it makes sense. We have reached a consensus inside the building with what we're going to do with the number 1 pick, and we are not trading back. And he had to reiterate that a couple of different times. So, yeah. I mean, foregone conclusion that Cam Ward's the number 1 pick here. What does it tell you that they are so set in it and in agreement on it?
So I try not to interpret things this way, but part of me, when I hear about them agreeing on a consensus, feels more like they are getting ahead of the who made the pick situation than they are telling us they're not trading the pick. And not a problem to do that. You do want to get ahead of the thing that was the only thing anyone in this market talked about in January or February. But if you come out on Tuesday and say, we have an organizational consensus, everybody agrees what we want to do on this pick. Okay, so the whole team agrees. This is not a Brinker thing. This is not a Borgonzi thing. This is not a Callahan thing. This is the Titans thing. And so what I heard was much less about, oh, the Titans fell in love with Cam Ward, and more about the Titans want you to know that this decision was reached by a group mind, a hive mind of thinkers who all agree on this, and there's no veto and there is no dissent. It is just, this is what the Titans are doing. And good for them. They reached their consensus. But the fact that they're saying nobody's going to call and get this deal, nobody bother calling, it's a day before the draft. There is nothing that they were going to hear that they hadn't already heard. Nobody's going to get that desperate the day before the draft.
You never You never
I
know.
can't imagine that a team would go through 4 months of scouting and then scramble the day of to be like, oh shoot, actually we don't like anybody but the number one player. That seems unlikely.
Look, Nick Suss reporting Chad Brinker has PTSD is what I'm hearing from the conversations that have swirled over the last 2 years around final say. Who has final say? No, I agree. That's what I heard too. Is they were like, we've reached a consensus. I was like, oh, that's messaging strategy right there. But it is interesting to hear a team talk so definitively about what they're going to do.
Totally
and I think that's interesting. And some of it is around, to your point, they've done the evaluations, they've learned about him. We've got a bunch of clips here, so let's hear from Borgonzi here on Cam Ward. I think it was one of the first questions he was asked, which is basically, what has changed? What have you learned? What do you know about him today that you didn't know about him early on? Turning over every stone, all the touch points, etc. Here was Borgonzi on Cam Ward.
Got to meet the person, right, and got an opportunity to sit down with him multiple times, whether it be the combine, pro day, his private workout. Got to meet his family. The competitive edge that he has. You can feel that talking with the kid. He's very intelligent. We've had him on the board several times with Brian. And just, the family comes from a great family as well.
There you go. Comes from a great family as well. One of my favorite comments from Brian Callahan about Cam Ward was, I think Corey Curtis asked him about the Fortnite stuff, which is Cam talking about, kind of joking, I think very intelligently to Brian Callahan's point about, his favorite receivers, Calvin Ridley, and his top 2 running backs in the league are Tajay Spear. And Brian kind of gets this wry smile and he looks and he goes, Cam's a pretty smart guy. And he knows his audience. He's a savvy dude. He's a savvy dude. So I don't think there's anything we've learned about Cam. Here's a question I had for you that's been swirling around in my head. Have we been smart enough at picking apart the technical part of Cam Ward's game?
What do you mean by that? Do you mean are we good enough at parsing what he's good at?
I don't. This is sort of half baked, but it's what I've been thinking the last couple of days, which is all these quarterbacks drift in the pocket. None of them are particularly great, 3-step plant throw. Cam Ward doesn't have necessarily the footwork and the arm and the timing all paired up yet. That's stuff you should be able to teach. That we definitely have mentioned the sort of processing and accuracy. Is that a problem? Does he take too many risks? The turnovers? Does he hold on to the ball? Is he a little too lackadaisical? We've done plenty of I'm not saying strengths and weaknesses haven't come up, but it feels like we did that at first, and then once the Titans sort of felt like they settled on Cam, we all kind of just started settling on Cam. Does that make sense?
I think that almost every quarterback in the NFL gets reduced to their superpower. And maybe that's produced to their superpower. The thing you are best at, if you are an elite quarterback, is the thing you'll get talked about the most for. So if it's Josh Allen, it's that, cyborg frame of his. And if it's Burrow, it's the pinpoint accuracy, always knowing where to go on the field. If it's Mahomes, it's the ability to create for himself.
Yeah.
So I feel like there has been a tendency to see the thing about Ward, which for me, it's the creating on third downs, creating in the fourth quarter, the backs against the wall, I'm going to win for my team thing. And I think it's reduced to see him like that. So I don't know if that's a inherent laziness or reductiveness from the entire beat. I think it's just the way we talk about quarterbacks is once you find 1 or 2 things to latch onto, you're not really going to sit around talking about, oh man, does Cam Ward have the ability to throw an 8-yard out route? I do think that there has been a lot of hyperbole when talking about Cam Ward, but that's going to happen with every draft.
It feels like that's the nature of that position in this pick, right? To some degree, regardless of who's picking or the player. I just think this class is a little bit sloppier with their mechanics as a whole at quarterback. Shador Sanders drifts back in the pocket, doesn't stay. There's not a true prototypical. I mean, maybe Tyler Shuck, maybe Kyle McCord. I don't know. There's not a true.
I'll put it this way.
Riley Leonard doesn't have any of that stuff either. Jalen Milroe doesn't have any of that stuff. Jackson Dart doesn't have any of that stuff. The true, I know how to 3-step throw, 5-step plant throw, pair up my motion, my drop, my eyes, my brain, and my feet all together. None of these guys really do that. Cam's probably the best, but like none of these guys truly do that.
Here's the way I will try to explain it, which is probably dumb, but it's the way I think about it. If you go back and read the NFL.com scouting reports for Jaden Daniels, for CJ Stroud, and for Cam Ward, there is just a positives and a negatives section, and they're bullet points. CJ Stroud and Jaden Daniels both had 10 positives. Cam Ward has 11. CJ Stroud and Jaden Daniels both had 7 negatives. Cam Ward has 11. So the idea of, pick apart this class, are they worse, are they stronger? Like, just look at the list. The people who do this professionally, who scout this, who look at this and say, this is how we're evaluating it, are going to tell you there's a lot of good about Cam Ward. And if you are the type of person who evaluates based off of the good, there's a lot of good. He could be as good as anybody. But if you're the kind of person who evaluates by trying to pick holes in what you're seeing, there are a lot of holes to pick too. That has always been the case.
I try to do both.
Yeah.
Isn't the right thing to do both?
Yes, but it's very hard. It is very hard to be both a positivist and a critical thinker, I guess.
And this is ultimately where I came from after leaving the press conference, too. Coach Will says, I also think we're all in on Cam. We want it to succeed. Certainly that's what the team thinks if they take him. They're all in on him. They think he's going to be great. They need it and want it to succeed. And so that's just what I like. I just felt like it wasn't a bad thing. I just walked out of that press conference thinking like, man, everyone really believes in Cam Ward.
Yeah.
And it's not just a coaching and front office thing. It's like the whole deal. Which brings us to by the way, Ed, this is where we're about to go here. And Coach says, Braden, I'm sorry that trade back has died. Yeah, I'm kind of bummed about that. But again, Cam Ward is good for content. So I've always said this. I am pro drafting Cam Ward for selfish reasons. For me personally. Ed says, am I wrong in thinking that we may be surprised with picks that are based on best player available and not need, which brings us to this comment from Mike Borgonzi yesterday about that very thing.
But we certainly have a lot of needs in the team right now. So, we're going to do our best to, stay true to the board, draft the best player available, not really reach for needs at this point. But this is a big opportunity for this organization, really a tone setter of this draft for the guys that we bring in here right now.
All right. I did hear consistently yesterday, and I had a chance to talk to some folks after the press conference as well, inside the front office, that even in their past jobs and in their past roles at other teams, at times they got a little too caught up with need. Mm-hmm. And so to hear them reiterate over and over and over and over again that we are going to stick with the board, stay true to the board, be loyal to the board, that I do think, to Ed's question, that does mean that we need to be prepared. And I think Paul and I have talked about this, like at 35, for example, if the number one player at a position falls to them and there's a huge run on edge rushers and the receivers don't make it to them, and all of a sudden Malachi Starks is sitting there and he's the best safety on the board, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen or that I would even approve of that, but just be prepared that if Malachi Starks is number 11 on their board and he falls to 35 and the best defensive end they have or edge rusher is like 59 and the best wide receiver they have on their board is 62, don't be surprised if I don't think they do it at 35, but I like the idea on a roster like this that you need to don't stress or push or reach for need. And they stress that in the press conference, and folks after the fact stress that with me as well.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think when you kind of combine that quote with another thing Borgonzi talked about, which is this idea of you're drafting somebody based off of how good are they going to be 2 or 3 years from now. You combine that, and it's a very different strategy than what Titans fans have grown accustomed to. We can talk about the Skoronski pick and how the whole messaging for that was, you want that, was it a blue dot player? Is that what Carthon described it as, of that guy that you can put the check mark next to and he's going to be a 10-year starter and he's ready now? And I think they're talking about projection and development a little bit more than maybe the last 2 drafts, maybe even predating that. I think the thing that fans might be more surprised by is not who they pick position wise, but who they pick starter wise. Like, I think we frame our perspective very much on this. Well, you fill this hole because you need a starter here. They might not pick. They might pick a player at a need without the expectation that he's a starter, even if he's the player at that need. Like, I think there is a degree of development, a degree of get the right guy that might be the new thing. So, yes, you might be a little bit surprised if it's a position you didn't expect, but it might be even more surprising in September if your second round pick or your fourth round pick isn't like oh gosh, he's supposed to start. We didn't have anybody here. The whole, like, last year, the messaging of, you drafted Cedric Gray, he needs to be a starter.
Yeah.
I don't know if that messaging is going to continue.
Well, and I said this on Monday show with PK just about Cedric Gray specifically. After having conversations this spring, I don't think this particular regime currently is as married to Cedric Gray as people think, and so I wouldn't be surprised if linebacker is a part of that. I think it's interesting, the 2 to 3 year vision of a player where he will be. And I asked Chad Brinker after the press conference. I said, "Are you having fun? Like, do you have fun at this? Is this a fun thing that you like to do?" And he was like, "Oh, dude, I love it. I love it." And I was like, "Is Friday more fun? Like, is it the negotiations? Is it between teams?" And he's like, "Honestly, it's all fun, but finding starting players on day 3, I think that's what that's what gets a general manager up, or a GM or a former GM up in the middle of in the morning. Is like, I found a starting player in the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds of the draft." Yeah. And that could be something that happens, to your point, 2 years down the road.
Yeah.
Because those guys are more developmental for an obvious reason. So I think that's interesting. The trades are also a part of it. They've totally nixed that there is no trade. First of all, I think it's the right strategy. Best available on a team with this many needs. Don't reach for need. Take great players. Like, that's it. I do think what's interesting that I got thinking about was, because the draft is now 3 days, because there's so much time between the first round and the second round, and because the Titans are picking 35, there is going to be a lot of conversation and action after the end of the first round and the beginning of the second round. So who's available? How many players are in a cluster for the Titans to feel comfortable with potentially moving back and getting into the third round? I do think that's absolutely an option. I think it's absolutely on the table. But there has to be a number of players that are on the board that they feel comfortable getting from that group. And there are certainly players that they have on their board that are first round grades that if they fall, they're not trading back.
Yeah.
Which is all the right stuff. So
yeah, it is good to say these things. It's better if we're going to be on here Friday or next week and saying they did these things. So
that's true.
Just like where we started, very excited to see things happen.
I want something to happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely, totally. I don't think they poo-pooed this, but they almost were caught off guard. PK asked about it. We've talked namely about Will Levis and Jeffrey Simmons as being, hey, keep an eye on these guys. We don't think they're going to get traded, but just keep an eye on them. They're assets that could be moved. And Mike Morganzi basically was like, "Nah, man, we haven't really thought about that. That's not really on the table." It doesn't mean that it could not present itself, but it's certainly not something that they are working on or actively pursuing. At least that's what they said. I do think trading back at 35 is absolutely on the table. I don't think trading number 1 or any players on the roster is on the table.
Yeah. Agree.
So, yeah, there you go. Okay, let's see. Where else are we going here? Okay. Let's hear from. So I thought this was Callahan always gives long answers and generally very thoughtful and honest answers. I appreciate that about him. This is about 1 minute and 45 seconds, about 2 minutes here. So this is basically, he was asked about the balance between letting a player be himself. And this goes right to my question about Cam Ward and evaluating him, and letting the player and teaching the player to grow into the best version of himself, for lack of a better phrase here. This is your colleague Gentry asked this question. Shout out to him for the good question. Brian had to pause and kind of stop and think about it for a second, which I, again, also appreciate from him. And here was his answer about the balance between polishing a quarterback and letting him be himself.
Guys have unique traits, and you try your best to not interfere with those. I don't want to do something that's going to take away what makes a player great. What their edge is. there's also a way that you have to play the position a lot, not all the time, but a lot of the time in the NFL that does lead to success. There's an efficiency part of it that matters, but when it's time to put the cape on and go be Superman, you see the guys around the league that all do it, and there's a lot of them that can make those big plays and big moments. And you want the quarterback to feel comfortable when it's time to make those types of plays or take those types of risks or make a tight window throw, that they have the green light and the confidence from us that it's okay to do it. And that's all a part of the development. And there's things that they'll make some bad decisions as a young player, and you got to correct them. And then they're going to make plays that are remarkable, and we're all going to be excited about watching it. I know there's definitely moments for me as you watch quarterbacks around the league, and you just know that the coach is over on the sideline going, like, throw it away, throw it away, throw it away, and all of a sudden they make an unbelievable play. And that's what makes the players in this league, and you don't want to take that away from them. But there's a balance between teaching the situation in a moment, and when is probably the right time for it, and when maybe we can throw the ball away or check the ball down. So it's a balance, certainly, and guys earn the right to do that and earn the trust to do that when they make those decisions and make the plays when those things matter. To me, it's over time you earn the right to do that. And sometimes it's terrifying as a coach, and that's more of a me problem than it is a them problem. So there's a balance though, and there's a line that which you got to be mindful of, but you certainly don't want to take what's special about a player away from them.
Right.
All right, that's literally what we're talking about, is balancing coaching Cam Ward versus allowing what makes Cam Ward special to make Cam Ward special.
Yeah. I don't think you want to enable anybody's worst qualities, but you don't want to take away anybody's best qualities. And that's the why am I tightrope? That's the word I couldn't think of.
Yeah.
That's the tightrope. We'll see how they do it. I think it's going to take an overhaul of the offensive philosophy a little bit, and we can talk about that a lot more in May and June and July and August. But it's going to be very interesting to watch.
Well, what makes it a tightrope is a lot of times it's the same skill.
Yeah.
The skill that makes you great is also the skill that makes you Brett Favre.
Yeah.
Like,
it's one of my favorite quirks of the English language is that almost every positive adjective has a synonym with a negative connotation. It's like judgmental versus discerning. They mean the exact same thing, but if you're discerning, you're really good, and if you're judgmental, you're really bad. If you are a gunslinger versus if you are a playmaker, if you create for yourself versus a risk taker, they're all the same thing.
Can you how many of these can you do? Go outside of sports. Do more.
You don't want to hear my entire stand-up act about this.
Do more judgmental and discerning, because I'm going to use all these against with my wife.
Well,
what about being clean? Can you do one with being clean?
Yeah. There's fastidious versus obsessive there.
I was thinking OCD versus clean.
Yeah, there's being tidy versus being a taskmaster. Particular, I am getting from off screen from my particular wife. Yeah, I've been doing this for years and years and years. It's one of my favorite things to do.
I like it. Coach says you can tell Callahan is ready for this. Actually, I've got more Callahan here. Let's play this since we're going to do final predictions and look back at some January tweets where we made predictions and see how close we feel, or if we're doubling down on those or not. This was Callahan on what he was asked. Why are the Titans? Why is this staff, this group of people, ready to take on a project like a rookie quarterback and give him a place to succeed? This was his answer.
I think one of the things unique to my journey in this profession is I've done it before too. I've been a part of a young quarterback, number one overall pick, coming into a team that picked number one for a reason. And we weren't good enough last year, so we're picking first, and we have a chance to add a really good player with the first overall pick, whatever it ends up being. But there is a lot of things that I learned from that first lesson of when you bring in a player like that, that'll help us in the process. So I think we've added the right players in free agency. I think we have good young players here. We got to do a lot better job coaching, first and foremost, and put ourselves in some better positions. So those things to me are all part of the equation, and I feel good about where we're at and where we're headed and how we're going to get there.
There you go. That's all I got from the press conference on Tuesday. We emptied the notebook there. Nick, is there anything else from the press conference that you took away that we haven't mentioned that you want folks to know about?
Not particularly. I kind of wish we got a little bit deeper into the actual roster dynamic of what they did in the off season, but you got a limited amount of time to talk it through. So I think that's probably more of a OTAs and beyond discussion. I think it's very fascinating to try and figure out, well, what are they trying to do? Like, what is the goal? Clearly, the goal was build the offensive line. They want to build the trenches. They want all of these things. What is it all going to lead to? And I think when we see, especially those picks between 30 and 130, in that range where we see what we do there, I think we're going to get a clearer picture of what their goal is for 2025. And once we know that, I think it's going to be easier to talk about.
Yep, I agree with that. It was one of the things that hit me that I would love to have gotten more time with them on, but it wasn't the place yesterday.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of, and it might have been you, I don't know, but it was kind of later in the press conference about blending sort of best available and need with the free agency strategy, blending them all together. I think that's kind of what you're talking about. And I think seeing how all of the different, like, you can't do the draft without the free agency class, and you can't do the free agency class without the draft class. So they all have to work together. Value is a word we all use, and they used yesterday. And so it's all about value at positions and costs and dollars and draft picks, and seeing how the whole puzzle fits together is the interesting and fun part. So first round prediction here. Before we get, prediction here for us in the first round is Cam Ward. But I do want to pull up the so this was the tweet that, so we did some shows back in Mobile and at the Senior Bowl, and we all sort of we were all there. It was, JT was there, Stoney was there, Sam and was there, and Easton from A to Z. We're all there kind of picking our players that we think these guys are going to be Titans, right? Easton says Jordan Savanea and the Florida State corner. I still don't know how to say his name.
Azariah Thomas.
Azariah Thomas. Stoney said Jack Besh and Miles Frazier. I think he's sticking with those two as potential picks if they get moved back in the third round. Those are two really good ones. I like that. JT said Jared Ivey and Jack Nelson. Okay, we'll see. I'm not even going to say who Sam picked because I'm not sure. I'm not sure we've talked about those two players at any point during the process. Let's see here. So that brings us to the two of us. I had Jalen Noel at the time was like a 4th or 5th round pick. He's now like a top 50 guy. So I kind of feel vindicated in that sense. And Tate Ratledge was the other one, Georgia interior offensive line. They really can't get either of those two guys unless they have a 3rd round pick, honestly. Looks like that's both where they're going to go. So I'm feeling less like they're going to be Titans, but vindicated because I think they're good quality players that moved up the board that the Titans are interested in. You went with Noel Williams and Quincy Riley. Those are two players that I absolutely think the Titans are targeting at 103, 120, or 141. And absolutely one of those two I think will be on the team. So I think you're right on top of it, Nick.
I feel good about those picks. Who was it? Was it Ron Wolf, whose old strategy was you have to add a quarterback every year? I feel like if your coach is Denard Wilson, you have to add a cornerback who is 6'1" or taller every single year. That's just kind of what you're going to do now, of just keep replenishing that position. And whether it's Quincy Riley, whether it's Noel Williams, that big physical wants to get in your face cornerback, I just think the Titans are going to stockpile every single year with that. So I'll stick with it. I will say it's one of those two guys. I at the time, I was probably a little bit closer toward Noel Williams. Now I might be a little bit closer towards Quincy Riley. But yeah, I feel good about that. And also, I think Jalen Noel, if you trade back in the 2nd round, that is Jalen Noel in the 50s, perfectly reasonable pick. I really like that one.
I think he could go later, much later than that.
I'm just saying, I think he could go as early as the 50s.
Gotcha. So remember, so you and we both are love the type of player. Like, so the two types of players I love, and this is maybe more of a Friday question and conversation after the first round, but I wanted to get it to you because Paul and I talked about it on Monday. And that is, there's two types of players I really love, one of which you talked about last week, which is just guys who played really good football in college, generally against like higher level competition for an extended period of time. They're just very good football players that for whatever reason maybe don't test well or don't run well or the combine or whatever. Just, the process doesn't always, third graders don't always test great, and they still could be very, very smart and awesome young kids. So the other one is the 5-star recruit who just hasn't developed or matured yet. Yeah. And of course, hilariously, I'm like mentioning all these players that I think fit that mold. And then people are like, what about MPF? And I'm like, Got me there. you got me there. Number 1 tackle in the country coming out of high school, 5-star recruit, 3rd-round pick. He is exactly the type of player I'm talking about. Didn't work out. So here's a list real fast. First round, I've got Luther Burden, Will Johnson, Malachi Starks.
Okay.
On the first list, the guys that are like, these guys were really, really good. And for whatever reason, a variety of different reasons, Starks, not a position of value. Burden, maybe some questions that I think are unwarranted off the field. And Will Johnson, because he didn't do a bunch of testing. All 3 of those guys were just very good at football every time they got on a field. You on board with those 3?
Gotcha.
Xavier Watts, Notre Dame. You on board with that?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. Donovan Jackson, offensive lineman for Ohio State. Two
Always
positions. Good. Yeah, been good his whole career. Seth McLaughlin, I like him. I think he's falls into that category.
Little bit less on him, but I like the concept.
Terrence Ferguson.
Okay.
Noel Williams.
Yeah.
And I'm pandering. Jay Higgins at this point. And Dylan Sampson, I think, is in this group. Sure. I just think there's a lot of guys that have just been really good players for a long time. And
I will give you another first rounder who shouldn't be on the Titans' radar. There's no world where he's a Titan. But something that I've been vindicated in these last 48 to 72 hours, I have been very consistent throughout this entire draft process that Calvin Banks is the best offensive lineman in this class. I think you and I have, if not been in agreement on it, just kind of unspoken agreement. Dude's really, really good at blocking. And this whole Armand Membu over him has never made sense to me. Seeing all of the tweets of who's going to be drafted way higher than you expect, Calvin Banks, I'm like, yeah, because he doesn't miss blocks. Yeah. Just 3 years of not missing blocks at the University of Texas. Good.
Right. And it's like Walter Nolan's kind of both, right? He's like both players. He's the 5-star who's developed slowly, but also very, very good every time he's been out there, kind of.
Consensus All-American last year.
Right. And so I agree. I think Banks is one I wrote down, and then I was like, well, he's already too high on the board, so I can't use him because he's not going to fall, right? Like he's going to I think it's Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks are your top 2 offensive linemen drafted this year. So in the first round. Any other first-round predictions you want to throw out there for anybody? This is our last chance.
I will stick with one I've had since January, which is Travion Henderson goes in the first round. I do think whether it is him or Omarion Hampton who goes second, I still kind of think that in the modern NFL, teams are going to fall in love more with what Henderson can do than what Hampton can do.
Put on the playoff game tape and just let it run.
I said it back in January or February. I do believe, and this might be my hottest draft take, that Travion Henderson will be to Jahmyr Gibbs as Ashton Genty is to Bijan Robinson. Nobody is faulting the Falcons for drafting Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson is and will for a long time be a top 10 running back in the NFL. He was the number 1 running back in that class. Nobody should have picked anyone over Bijan Robinson as a running back. Jahmyr Gibbs is the bigger star because he's going to be asked to be in a rotation and he's only going to need to touch the ball 10 to 12 times a game. And he's going to be fresh, and he's going to get 7 yards per touch, and he's going to be a star. I feel that about Travion Henderson.
It helps that the Lions are on national television and the Falcons are bad.
Yeah.
So there's also
it helps Jahmyr Gibbs. It doesn't help Bijan Robinson.
That's what I'm saying. It helps. It helps your case that the Lions are a great team and the Falcons are not.
And when Travion gets picked by the Chiefs and he's splitting carries with Isaiah Pacheco.
Valid. That's what I agree. I agree with you. All right. In Sinkers Beverages, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Come to the parties, guys. Thursday night draft party. JT's going to be there. Stoney's going to be there. A bunch of y'all are going to be there. It's going to be a lot of fun. All you can eat barbecue. All you can drink booze, and all the money, every penny, not all the proceeds, every penny goes to the Our Kids Foundation to help kids in Middle Tennessee. Please come out and support. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's for a good cause. If you don't like kids, I don't want you to come out. So there you go. Otherwise, go to the Tennessean, pay for good journalism as well. Nick and I will be back Friday morning, 9 a.m. live on another short version of recapping the day one and kind of looking ahead to the weekend. I know you got the Hot Read Pod all weekend live. And, of course, you got Paul Kaharski as well. And so lots of great stuff. So going to be a fun weekend, going to be a lot of fun. And, yes, I'll leave on this final note from Alex and C. Rich in the comments. I do feel like the Titans are missing an opportunity to get a huge draft haul.
Yeah.
But I also like Cam Ward, so it's fine.
Yeah. You want to do some more adjectives before we go? Hit me with an adjective.
Let's do I'm trying to think of one that's like pragmatism about trading back. I'm pragmatic because I want to trade back from number 1 to get an entire draft Hall.
Yeah, too conservative.
Or I'm too conservative.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take a risk on Cam Ward. So there you go. Well done, Nick. On
Thank
that
you.
note, thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you guys on Thursday night, and we'll talk to you guys on Friday morning as well. For Nick, I'm Braden. Peace. Enjoy the first round, everybody.